Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Lil Dudes Insect Academy podcast. Wait, before we get started, I just wanted to say thank you for tuning into this episode of the Lil Dudes Insect Academy podcast, and just ask you to please hit the like button below or click the subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube, or follow this podcast if you are listening. That really helps the show out. But also, if you want to help us further, then join our Patreon. We have an awesome community that is growing there. Or if you want to make a one-time donation, we are a nonprofit foundation, so head to our website. Both the Patreon and the website will be linked down below. But without further ado, back to the episode. I'm your host, Bradon Coy, and I'm super excited to be here. But everybody, welcome to the show, Jace. Jace is the founder of the Global Entomology Coalition, and that's the organization that he runs. We're going to talk a lot about that today, but me and Jace met at ESA in Phoenix, Arizona, and he also had a booth there, and his organization and my organization share a lot of similarities and a lot of the same passions. So I'm excited to chat with Jace. Jace, thank you so much for taking your time to chat with me, but welcome to the show, Jace. Say hello to the people for me.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Hi everyone. I'm Jace. Yeah, as Brandon mentioned, the founder of the Global Entomology Coalition. So we are a new organization. We just started a couple years ago. Our primary focus is kind of bridging that gap between the science of entomology and the general public. And we're trying to do this in a lot of innovative ways, and I'm sure we'll get into some of it. But
Mm-hmm.
one of our primary flagship programs, you could call it, is called Expedition Entomology. And what this is we take people, regardless of academic background, just anybody that wants to join, we bring them to biological field stations around the world. And our purpose is to get entomological research started, but also provide that baseline insect data for any other researchers' ongoing ecological studies. One of the things we've seen a lot is that most field stations, a lot of field stations around the world, they don't have that baseline invertebrate data.
Mm.
And so we're bringing groups of adventurous travelers to these remote locations to get that started. And yeah, we started a couple of years ago from our educational programs here in New England. We're based out of New Hampshire in the US. And our educational programs were traveling exhibits, I believe similar to what you're doing, Brandon, bringing live insects and mounted insects to display to nature centers, museums, pretty much anywhere that'll have us. We go to bars for citizen science talks, science cafes, pretty much anywhere.
That's really cool. Well, I'm intrigued, like how this came to be. Like, what originally got you interested in this? Because I think this is a really cool alternative career that a lot of people in entomology could go with, like starting your own business or starting your own organization. So, what originally got you interested in bugs? Because I know your path is a little different than a lot of the other guests that I have. So, I'm interested in hearing about that. What got you interested in bugs originally?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, insects are one of those things that's just you grow up with the passion. The
Hmm.
passion can either fall aside in favor of, a 9 to 5
Yeah,
working in an office somewhere, or it can grow to something massive. And I
yeah.
think anybody in this field, they start with that passion. Mine began obviously as a child watching ants and exploring in my backyard. Eventually that grew and I was able to work at the University of New Hampshire at their insect lab. And just these little things that I would just gain experience with eventually just made this passion kind of blow up. And one of the things I've noticed in my own journey is that the things that really exploded that passion was the hands-on experiences with insects.
Mm.
And so that's kind of where this organization was born from. So I have a love of travel, which also plays into it. And not only getting those cultural experiences, but also those experiences in nature and learning about the natural history of the world outside of my little bubble here in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And what I've noticed in a lot of the education programs I would do, I would just go down to a street with some insects and show people and engage with passersby. And really there's a big difference between when somebody sees an insect, say in a cage or at like a, in a terrarium or at a zoo, like an insectarium.
Mm-hmm.
A big difference between that and actually being able to see it uncaged, see that it can get away if it wanted to, hold the animal, handle the animal, see it kind of from all angles. It cuts away that almost TV like quality when it's in a terrarium,
Right.
and it allows you to have that greater engagement. And so that's kind of where this was born. We want people to not only engage with the animals themselves to gain that appreciation, but engage with them in their natural habitats, whether it's in our backyard or whether it's in the rainforests of Panama or the savannas of Africa, you know, getting that deeper connection with the animal itself and its natural habitat
Mm-hmm.
is our primary goal and kind of where we started.
Yeah, really, really cool, and I love what you're doing with that. But yeah, so you've always loved insects, but what like inspired you to like take this to the next level? Whereas like you could have, kept it as a hobby, or like, you could have gone to school for entomology. Like what made you decide like, oh yeah, this is the thing that I want to do?
Well, it came from, I think, two areas, and one would be the overwhelming need
Mm,
for entomological research and
mm-hmm.
conservation,
Yeah.
especially now, with, and as you know, and I'm sure we've talked about it 1,000 times with a lot of people, is, insects are in decline,
Oh yeah.
death by 1,000 cuts, as we say. There's no one thing, but they're in trouble
Yeah.
with a lot of wildlife and a lot of other, environmental factors. Like right now is the kind of the time to get people engaged and to help. But in addition to that, my passion for insects, I felt like I couldn't contain it for just myself. I wanted to
Yeah.
share it with
Yeah.
everybody. And I think,
Contagious.
yeah, I think a lot of us educators, informal educators, academics, anyone that's in the field of entomology, like, all these cool facts, but you want to share it with somebody. You want the world to see what you see in these
Mm,
animals.
mm-hmm.
And that's really why I'm taking this to this next level. In addition to, the education programs, I want I want to get people to see what I see in these animals, and not only that, but generate the excitement about them so that can drive some action towards protecting them, protecting the environments that they're in, and really understanding them as more than just pests and disease vectors.
Right. Yeah, and I think giving people that opportunity that you give them with the trips that we'll talk about in a minute is such a cool way to do that, because especially if you're, in the US, or like especially if you're in an urban environment, you don't really think about bugs other than like the roaches that show up in your bathroom, right? And so that's such a cool experience for people that might not even think about it, might not even really like bugs. Like, do you ever get people that don't like bugs or like are afraid of bugs?
Yes, all the time, and
Yeah.
those are some of my favorite people to talk to about
Uh-huh.
insects and bugs, because they're really the people that I want to be talking to,
Yeah.
because they're the ones that need their minds changed. They're the ones that
Mm-hmm.
need to see, that I feel need to see these animals for what I see.
Yeah.
And so they're often the most fun for me to talk to, because get everything from gross, get it away, squash it,
Mm-hmm.
kill it with fire, all
Mm-hmm.
these different reactions to insects. And to have somebody start with that, and then slowly you can kind of change somebody's mind, and at
Yeah.
the end of speaking with them, engaging with them, they say, "Oh, okay, maybe I won't squash that bug when I go home, or I'll leave that nest that's in my backyard alone," or something like that. Yeah,
Yeah, and I really think it's more of a lack of knowledge. Like people often fear what they don't understand. So I think that's the most common thing that I see is like if you don't understand something, you
absolutely.
might be
Yeah.
more afraid of it, right? So I think that's really like at the root of all of this. Yeah, so really really cool stuff. So I want to jump to now. Like, where are you with your organization? Like, what are some of the exciting things that you're doing now with it. Yeah, tell us a little bit about what you're up to right now.
I've got my hands in a lot of cookie jars right now, but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
really, our primary focus is promoting invertebrate research, primarily in biodiversity studies. And we're doing that with our expedition entomology program. Our other focus is in educational programming and outreach. And so we're doing bug camps. We actually just started a bug camp here in New Hampshire, hoping to expand that nationally in the
That's
future.
awesome.
But this is our first one here in New England over at the World Fellowship Center in Albany, New Hampshire. And we do bio blitzes at that property every year. And so that's another part of it too. We do bio blitzes all the time. I partner with other entomologists and informal educators in the area in New England to, take people on nature walks and show them what we can.
Mm-hmm.
We're working on we have a lot of programs too with entomophagy that we're trying to enter. So,
Yeah.
for those that don't know, entomophagy is the eating of insects. And, this has potential to be a huge contributor to sustainable food source while, there's a lot of cultural taboos to jump over there. But
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think one of the problems is there's no resources for entomophagy that can help battle those cultural taboos. We
Yeah.
have no resources, nowhere to get these ingredients. Farming insects for human consumption is a pretty new thing. There's all sorts of cool companies out there that are working on making scalable solutions. So we're looking into a lot of entomophagy type programs, and
Mm.
we have an app coming out soon, which is called Bug Bites. And
Okay.
so this is a recipe sharing app that anybody can share their own insect recipes. We'll have it up and running hopefully within the next month or so, but we're
Wow,
still
that's awesome.
compiling all of the data for that. And, we just want to try to make it more accessible. So that's one area, and provide the education around the nutrition and the benefits of eating insects. Now, I love insects, but I also see a need
Yeah.
for consumables as well.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because I don't think I've really talked about that much on the podcast before, but like I see it as a huge opportunity to help with the hunger issue and also the sustainability issue because it's way more like less infrastructure is needed to farm insects for food. And obviously you need more
Absolutely.
insects than if you would have cattle or whatever. But yeah, it's really interesting to me. And then obviously they put off a lot less waste and all of those things. So I've also heard that insects like pound for pound have more protein than beef, which is really interesting.
Yeah, that's true. Insects have so pound for pound the protein is usually equal to or greater, but they also have a whole host of macronutrients too. So these are things like your vitamin B's, your minerals, your and other vitamins
Hmm.
that they're a source of. Some of them are sources of omega fatty acids and all these other great nutrients that kind of fly under the radar when we're talking about insect proteins,
Yeah.
because it's first and foremost they are an incredible protein source, but they come with all these other benefits. But like you were saying, I mean, 70% of land use in the United States alone is agricultural. And you can fact check me on this, but I believe it was somewhere between 20 to 30% of that is used as feed for livestock,
Mm. Hmm.
whereas a huge portion, and I'm not going to give a number because I don't have it in front of me, huge
Hmm.
portion is for, cattle ranching, for grazing. And then, I think just 9% of that is food crops for humans. So
Wow.
a massive amount of our agricultural system, which takes up most of the land in the United States and creates massive breaks in wildlife habitats, in addition to deforestation and habitat loss to make room for agricultural practices. If we could just cut 50% of that out and
Yeah.
replace it with insect proteins, we could save, the amount of land equal to California, Montana, West Virginia, Wyoming, and I believe New Mexico combined. That is the amount of land. If we just cut 50% of our protein diet and change it to insects,
Mm.
we could save massive swatches of land. Now, this is a very huge simplification of what
Right,
it would
yeah.
take to do something like this, but it just goes to show like there are huge benefits. I mean, they only require 1% of the water, 1% of the feed, 1% of the land
And
that
time
traditional
too. They
protein
grow really
sources need.
quickly.
Super fast.
Yeah.
Not to mention the potential for getting rid of plastic waste. I mean, that's a whole other area I'd love to explore some more, but you might have seen that. I believe you might have talked about it at one point, but plastic eating mealworms,
Mm-hmm.
tenebrionids,
Mm-hmm.
soldier fly larvae that are able to not only feed on the plastics, but generate a waste that's plastic free. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Scalability is the issue, but yeah, these are all hugely um, these are huge undertakings that require massive scalability,
Yeah.
but it has potential to, solve a lot of hunger issues around the world. And it has a potential to reclaim wild lands that were taken away for cattle ranching.
Right. And I really see it as similar to like seafood, like shrimp and lobster, right? That's basically
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
insects are. I mean, they're both crustaceans, so it's like I don't see why we don't eat insects. Like if you like shrimp and you like, lobster and stuff like that, I don't see how it's any I don't see why there's this big stigma around it. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And
It's
most of the
really
world eats insects as a primary protein source as well.
absolutely. Yeah. And there's so many places you can go to experience that as well. And, insects, they're, they vary in flavor greatly from species to species. I mean, you could
Hmm.
have, the crickets and the grasshoppers are, they have their kind of nutty, earthy flavors. But then you have things like giant water bugs, the belostomatids. If you ever get a chance, highly recommend trying them. They
Mm,
actually taste like mint. They have a minty flavor
really?
and it's extremely pleasant and light. I know in Japan they actually have something called Tagame cider, which is a soda made with belostomatiid extracts.
No way.
It's delicious.
Wow. I thought those would taste like mud or something, just like from where they live. Wow,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of assumptions like that you can make just like looking at the animal, being like, I don't know if I would eat that based off of what it's eating,
Right.
but the flavor profiles just vary greatly from species to species.
That's really cool. So have you experienced any of that in the places you've gone?
Yeah, yep, yeah. I try it any chance I get. I've had the belostomatids, I've had all the crickets, the grasshoppers, the mealworms. I was in Japan a couple years ago, and they made a tea out of silkworm. It's a
Hmm.
Bombyx mori, the domesticated silkworm. They
Yeah.
made a tea out of its frass. So, and it
Okay.
was it was pretty good. I mean, it was
Yeah.
so Bombyx mori feeds only on mulberry, and so their frass basically is just like a compressed, dehydrated mulberry. So when you put it in a tea, it's almost like creating a mulberry tea.
Huh. All
Very
right.
earthy.
Yeah,
I
I
would suggest
wouldn't.
some sweetener, but it wasn't bad.
Yeah, I mean, I
There's some
wouldn't think to
interesting
do
ways
that,
to
but
prepare them. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, that's
But yeah,
cool.
I've made cupcakes out of silkworm pupae powders.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's all sorts of options out there. You just got to do a little digging.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the problems why it's not super accessible because you can't just go to the grocery store to try these things. You have to
Right.
special order from certain websites and or experience it in the native culture that, you know, eats insects.
So the app you were talking about that you're releasing soon, is it like completely community based? Like people can go on there and post their own recipes?
Yep. Yeah, so
Okay.
it's open. I'm, hoping to get a worldwide community of entomophagists on here because I want somebody, here in the United States or Canada,
Mm-hmm.
in places where, it's frowned upon or it's, taboo to eat insects.
Yeah.
I want them to see, a recipe that somebody posted from, that's been a family recipe on the other side of the world. I want them to be able to try that and say,
Mm-hmm.
wow, this is actually really good because they're so versatile. And
Yeah.
So this app that we're creating and launching soon is really meant to be everybody's their own chef. Upload your own recipes. The community can vote on it, rate it, suggest things about it, tell us how they did it. So it's almost like a social network of home ento chefs as well to create that community and try to minimize the stigma of eating insects because they really
Yeah.
are going to be, if not soon, but going to be a very important food source for a massively growing human population.
Wow, that's so cool. Yeah, that's really really awesome. So, I want to talk about your trips, Expedition Entomology. Tell us a little bit about that. Like, what is the average trip like?
So each one is very, very different depending
Hmm.
on where we're going and really the goals for each of the field stations. So, for example, we just got back from Panama a few weeks ago and we went to Cocobolo Nature Reserve. And it's an amazing little spot. It's a very small reserve, but it's an extremely critical habitat.
Hmm.
So what we did is we brought our participants out there. We did some tent camping in the jungle for about a week. It's a pretty basic accommodation. They have a communal area for where we have dinner. They have a kitchen and everything, but as far as sleeping and accommodation, it's all tent camping.
Okay.
So we would go out and do some night walks and really just to gain a whole perspective of the biodiversity there. You know, it could be anything from one day we were sifting through the Momoni River looking at the aquatic insect diversity there.
That's really cool.
And then, next day going up to the top of the highest point into the cloud forest that's part of the reserve. This part it's definitely not for the faint of heart. There are, bullet ants everywhere. I did get stung by a bullet ant. So that
Yeah.
was an interesting experience,
Mm-hmm.
but definitely, you know, it was a fun one, even though
Almost a rite
it
of
wasn't
passage.
pleasant. Yeah, exactly. It felt
Yeah.
like a rite of passage for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that one is much more, bare bones. We're out there in the middle of the jungle trying to figure out what wildlife calls this area home. And it's
Hmm.
a very critical migratory habitat right in the intersection between South America, Central America, and North America. It's connected to the Mesoamerican wildlife corridor.
Hmm.
So you're seeing species in this tiny area that you'll find way down at the bottom of South America and way up here in North America. So it's really a convergent spot.
Yeah.
And while we were there, we had a stick insect expert, a phasmid expert named Pablo Valero. He confirmed while we were there on the second day that we were there, he confirmed 6 new species of stick insect
Wow.
with I think another 6 or 7 that he had to take back to his lab to confirm that he's pretty sure are new species. We
That's
had
exciting.
new mantid records for Central America, hundreds of different species recorded. It was just a really really interesting place to be. That's one aspect. The other kind of thing that we'll do is we actually have an entomophagy focused expedition to Thailand coming up in
Nice.
November.
Hmm.
And this one is much more of a cultural entomology kind of focus, a little less
Yeah.
on the research and biodiversity side. And so together with a friend of mine out there who kind of grew up in a hill tribe culture of entomophagy. He's going to be guiding through some of the jungles there. Really cool. We'll chop down some bamboo on the way. We'll make our own bamboo cups. We'll cook rice in it with whatever insects we can find, and then we'll grind up our own spices at our huts and create some of the most flavorful dishes you'll ever have.
Oh, that
That
sounds
one's
awesome.
a little less camping in the jungle, but still you're in open air bungalows in the jungles
Hmm.
of northern Thailand. I'll give one more example. In Greece, we're setting up an expedition to Greece, and it's an interesting one because we're going to the Ionian Islands. There's a place called Kalamos, and Kalamos is a very small island, but it's been untouched by tourism. Whereas a lot of the other islands in Greece have been cleared for tourism, big resorts, big beach resorts put up,
Hmm.
and this one is relatively untouched.
Hmm.
And the owner of the field station out there has seen Lucana cervus, the European stag beetle, which is on the UICN red list as a threatened species.
Mm-hmm.
And he's had some trouble with illegal logging over there. And so, what we do with participants there is we're actually searching for this one specific species. We're looking for Lucana cervus. We're
Wow.
trying to determine its population on the island and if there is an actual, stable breeding population there to help contribute to conservation legislation for that island. Actually, there's about 3 islands in that area that we'll be working on. But that
Mm.
one's a little more luxurious. We'll stay on a boat. We'll swim over to the island or kayak over to the island or whatever, and
Yeah.
take our time looking for these things, being a little more passive, setting up some light traps, some flight intercept traps, and yeah, enjoying our time on the beach.
That's so cool. Wow, these sound amazing, and I'm kind of curious, like, so with the stag beetle or with the Panama trip, you get this data, right? Do you then work with someone to like publish it or like write a paper, or like what do you do with the data, or do you provide it to researchers?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So we
Mm-hmm.
use a variety of resources. So number one, we almost always have an iNaturalist program going on. So we
Mm-hmm.
can at least get some of those baseline recordings down, whether they've been fully identified or not. We like to have the record there. But we also work with various partners in the areas. So with Panama, we we're going to be working with the University of Panama. So any specimens we collect there, we take over to the university afterwards with our identifications, and then the University of Panama and their students will either confirm or deny our identifications and use the specimens for their own research projects
Mm-hmm.
and other places. So for Greece, if and when hopefully we find um, a recorded population of Lucana cervus, the field station manager will actually be publishing the findings and using those published findings to hopefully contribute to those conservation plans. So we do have area partnerships with different universities and researchers, and we try to have at least one or two specialists and taxonomists to join us
Mm.
that is looking to kind of do some of this biodiversity research and try to help describe new species. For example, with Panama, we had Pablo, who's the phasmid expert, who was
Yeah.
really helpful in quickly identifying new species of stick insects. I know he's one of the few phasmid experts out there, especially few phasmid taxonomists. And so taxonomists are the kind of clade of entomologists that we like to work with and invite to come on our expeditions to
Mm-hmm.
help me learn and everybody else learn. So that's the other thing about these programs is I'm an informal educator. I know a lot about my local species here in New England,
Yeah.
but I'm not necessarily an expert in Panama. I'm not an expert in Thailand. I'm not an expert in Greece.
Yeah.
And that's where, having local collaborators come in is can be a lot of fun. And if there's not local collaborators like that joins us, it's still a lot of fun for myself and the participants to all learn together and
Mm.
go through the process of identification. If we have dichotomous keys, if we have any other resources like that, is to teach that process but really go through it together and create that
Yeah.
experience with each other.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious, where did you learn all of your scientific um like background, like identification, and I know you guys do some collecting too. Like, are you self-taught or did you go to college? Where did you learn all of that stuff?
Yeah, I'm mostly self-taught,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't go to college, at least for entomology. I went for marine science.
Okay.
Um, just a little diving degree actually down in the Florida Keys,
Okay.
so a little different. But
Yeah.
really, really, I've had the passion since I can remember, since I was a kid. It's been kind of a lifelong journey of just learning and then thinking about the science part of things and like I want to learn how to do that. I want to learn how to do it properly.
Yeah.
And so I would, self-teach myself these things. But really the big thing is, I worked at the University of New Hampshire in the insect collection there for a
Right.
while, and it was really helpful for me to have, somebody, the chair at the time, his name was Don. It was really helpful for me to have somebody like Don take a chance on somebody that wasn't a student, that doesn't have this background,
Yeah.
that just had an interest to come in and work on these projects, everything from biosurveillance using Cerceris fumiginus, the smoky beetle bandit, to
Hmm.
find the emerald ash borers,
Yeah.
moth surveys, identification um, of plant hoppers, and just reorganizing of the entire collection. And that really helped me, having that one person that was willing to take that chance. So if there's any you know, entomology teachers out there, professors, chairs, I highly recommend also giving a chance to people that don't necessarily have that academic background,
Mm.
because it can make a huge impact.
Yeah, for sure. And I also want to mention for those of you listening, if you're like interested in bugs but not sure about college, like you don't have to go to college to make a career out of science and out of entomology even. And Jace is a great example of that. Like there's so many other opportunities that you can go without going the academic route. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that you can start your own business or organization, or there's so many things that you could do, and there's so many holes that need to be, filled. Like with the entomophagy we were talking about a minute ago. There are so many careers that could be made out of that if we start moving that direction as a society. Really exciting stuff, but yeah, really cool stuff. So, how do you find like your connections in all of these different countries? I'm kind of interested in that. Like, do you just like know a bunch of people, or how do you make those relationships?
That's a good question. That's another thing I'll say as some advice for anybody looking to do some outside the box entomology work is
Hmm.
you gotta just find people and ask them. You gotta email blast professors, email blast researchers, find the field stations out there, talk to them, because most of these places they want you to be there. They want the research to be happening. They want the visitors. They want to be able to educate. And one of the things that I used was to contact a lot of these biological research stations was um, I'll try to find the link that I can give you, and maybe Brandon, you can share it as well. But there's someone put together a map of all the biological field stations in the world. And so I was
Mm.
exploring that map, like, all right, well, this is a cool area. I think that has a lot of potential for research. What field stations are here? And then I would see the name of the field station. I would look them up. I would find the contact information. But moreover, I try to find research stations that really need the help too, because biological field stations are underfunded,
Yeah.
and as anybody in the entomology field can attest to, it's there's a big funding shortage, especially
Yeah.
now. And the funding that is out there, a lot of it is for in the agricultural space or the vector control space, and there's not a whole lot of you know taxonomic funding or biodiversity research funding for insects,
Hmm.
because we have a very, a big need for, agricultural entomologists. We have a big need for vector control as a species, but uh, the rest of entomology kind of falls to the wayside of this big funding avenue. And
Mm.
so that's really one of the areas where we're trying to promote, is that insects are a lot more valuable than what they're being funded for right now, and
Hmm.
that's one of the primary purposes of these programs.
Sort of a similar question. How do you find, or do they find you, the people that go on these trips with you, like the participants?
Yeah, so it's tough because it's a very niche thing to
It
do.
is, yeah.
um, and since we are a new organization, it's been difficult cutting through the noise of the internet and trying to scream from the mountaintops that we exist and get
Yeah.
people to see us. So it's definitely been difficult, but really word of mouth is the best way that we found. Going to the ESA meeting last year was great. It was our first year at the ESA meeting,
Nice.
and just doing a lot of, talking about it at a lot of our educational programs. And, every avenue we get, we try to talk about it with everybody. And we don't have, you know, we don't have the biggest following, we don't have the biggest voice right now, but we are building that. And,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
there's a big community of entomophiles that are really interested in these programs, and that are the hardcore ones that come out with us.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and that's what the internet's all about. So yeah, it's great. It's great that you guys are starting to utilize that. Really cool. I've been watching some videos that you guys have released from the Panama trip, and it's really fun. But yeah, so of course I'll leave the links for the Global Entomology Coalition social media in the description of this episode, so you guys can go check that out. But yeah, so lots of stuff happening with your organization. Where do you see this going, like in 10 years? What are some big plans for the future for both you and your organization as well?
Really, we're just trying to take baby steps for now, but
Mm-hmm.
um, we want to be, our big goal is to provide an avenue, one, for entomological research and entomological jobs. We want to be a source to provide those kind of outside the box jobs, the expedition guides, the personal taxonomist to Panama and things like that. Have all these different avenues, entomophagy. So entomophagy, I think, is going to be a huge one for us. We
Mm.
really want to dive into that space and kind of spread the awareness and break that cultural taboo. And really, our primary goal is to break down the barriers between academia and the general public,
Yeah.
because there's such a very mysterious view of what, especially nowadays, very mysterious view of, what scientists are doing in their labs, and, what they're doing out in the field.
Yeah.
And if we can, get everybody involved into that, regardless of academic background, I think it can really foster a large degree of not only trust, but appreciation of all the work that goes into, environmental research and invertebrate research, but also our biggest goal, I would say, is to kind of foster an international community, create a community where, you know, regardless of where you live, everybody can get together for insect adventures, for insect conservation.
Yeah.
And so we want to do a lot of very big programs. We want to expand our education programs worldwide, our bug camps, expeditions. Obviously, we want to help out as many field stations as we can, but we're very small right now, so we can only do a handful at the moment.
Yeah.
And yeah, we have some big aspirations, and we think insects are not just something to be protected and saved and studied and understood,
Mm.
but they also present a tool for us all to use, not to exploit, but to use to
Absolutely.
teach natural history, to teach an appreciation of, wild spaces and your local environments, as well as the, you know, global ecosystem. So there's a lot of red tape and a lot of cultural misgivings about insects to get over, but we're hoping that we can create that cultural shift and, make insects the new panda. We want everybody to see insects as these adorable, useful things that need to be saved.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really awesome, and it's important, and it really starts with education, which is why me and you, I think, are so similar in that way. Like, it all starts with education and getting people to understand and appreciate these things, because what they don't appreciate, they won't want to protect, right? So that's what is really at the core of both you and me, I think. So yeah, it's really awesome for what you're working on. Super exciting to see more and more organizations like yours pop up all over the place. Yeah, Jace, I was curious, what are some other like things you enjoy in your spare time, like hobbies or other things you do aside from work, either bug related or not?
Yeah, so part of this whole thing kind of stemmed from my other passion, which is travel and cultural
Mm-hmm.
exchange.
Mm-hmm.
So I love to travel. I love to meet new people, meet and experience new cultures, and you know, not just the touristic part of areas, but really deep dive. And I like to be challenged and kind of get uncomfortable when I'm not in a cultural context that I'm used to, that I was, grew up with. It's aside from insects, it's my favorite thing ever. Just getting to experience other points of view, other people's perspectives, other regional perspectives. And, I also love, the intersection of art and science.
Mm.
So I think there's, especially with insects, I mean, they're beautiful, beautiful creatures,
Yeah.
but, you know, there's a fine line between the art of entomology and the science of entomology.
Yeah.
And I think art is an incredible tool to get people to appreciate our natural world too. So art and travel are huge for me. Those are a couple of my passions outside of the world of entomology that also, you draw a Venn diagram, they all kind of
Yeah.
encircle each other.
Uh-huh.
But yeah.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And I thought of this question earlier today, and there's this big thing in, I would say, especially in American culture right now, around ecotourism, right?
Mhm.
So you go to these eccentric places and see all the wildlife there. The ethical side of things is another conversation. But how does like your organization compare to like modern ecotourism?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked that
Mm-hmm.
because I try to avoid using the word ecotourism with
Yeah.
what we do.
Yeah.
And the clear difference is, eco tours, anything that's, I'm always cautious when anything's labeled eco anything.
Yeah.
But eco tours are very often, you know, very targeted, very um, they don't usually provide any great benefit to either science or conservation.
Yeah.
And it'll be maybe an hour of walking or whatever through a forest and looking at the sloths or anything like that, which is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of fun and it's a great way to generate appreciation. But then there's they'll go back to their luxury hotels, which
Yeah.
just have a lot of greenery around, and because
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of greenery, they'll call it an eco resort,
Yeah.
even though they're spraying it to pesticides so
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
like crazy. But ours are really just highly focused. Like you're basically out there with us doing field work. It's not necessarily a tour because there's an equal combination of actual scientific work that we're doing and a little bit of downtime. And we try to make everything as fun and engaging as we can. And
Yeah.
just the general nature of this is fun and exciting, and it's really a very unique experience. But really, at the end of the day, the difference is that we're contributing real data, real science that wasn't there before. So we're not just creating these new programs, we're
Mm.
providing the data to other researchers, whatever field they may be, that they can layer into their own ecological studies.
Yeah.
On top of that, too, these expeditions, they fund the research and the research stations. So the revenue that we get from these, it directly pays for the infrastructure for the field stations. We bring equipment donations with us to every field station we go to. So we drop off, we'll have light traps and flight intercept traps and
Mm.
nets and whatever equipment that we can provide them that they have the capacity to hold, we'll give them. We also provide, you know, collection maintenance. So there's one station over in South Africa that has an actual little natural history museum with a decent sized collection of insects.
Mm-hmm.
And one of our goals when we're out there is to help clean that up and organize it and but at the same time we're getting exposed to the insects that are in the area. So we're really providing an actual service rather
Yeah.
than just education alone. So it's highly educational, but also highly valuable for the field stations and the researchers that we visit.
Oh, that's so cool. So it's not a vacation. It's a, you're contributing towards something, which is super cool. And I don't know that other people can say that about their vacations, because like you're directly contributing to like novel research that's never been done before. I mean, that's so cool.
Yeah, and with these, there's that potential to, when we have something published, they are contributors. Our participants are
Hmm.
contributors. So, there's that there's definitely uh, um, a personal benefit that people
Yeah.
are going to get from these that's a lot deeper than a traditional eco tour. I mean, by giving people these extremely personal experiences with insects and natural ecosystems, kind of outside the lens of an eco tour or a
Yeah.
tightly controlled activity, it helps expose the incredible things that, the researchers are doing behind the scenes. And it really opens that doorway to a science appreciation and sparks a personal conservation philosophy. So hopefully they take that, newfound philosophy, that newfound, hopefully, passion, they take it home and it's like an intangible yet deeply meaningful souvenir. And
Mm.
there's that always that potential too that, they'll be able to contribute, a legacy. Their name will be on a published paper. And that's, for anybody that's not in academia, that's a really big deal. And for me, that's a really big deal. And I think for anybody to publish a paper, no matter what it is, it's always a big achievement. And giving people that opportunity to do this great work while on vacation, it it just creates this much deeper connection and much stronger sense of accomplishment
Mm.
than a vacation alone. Not
Mm-hmm.
to say we don't have an incredible amount of fun and we
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
downtime. I'm not just working everybody like, no, you can't rest now. We got specimens to identify. We've got hammocks and swimming areas and go take a nap if you need to. I know it's a rough day, but it's a lot of fun and it's an experience you don't get at a traditional eco tour.
That's so cool. Well, Jace, before we wrap it up, is there anything else you wanted to say or mention about anything before we close it up?
No, I mean, I would just love it if everybody visited my website and
Mm-hmm.
spread the word about what we're doing. We
Yeah.
are a brand new organization where there's a lot of struggles with getting recognized out there and
Oh
getting,
yeah.
like I said before, cutting through that noise of the internet.
Oh yeah.
And we need everybody's support to be able to do a lot of these big initiatives that we have planned.
Yeah, definitely. And for those of you listening, I will leave all of the links in the description. You guys can check out the website and explore the trips and keep an eye out for that app as well. That's coming out soon. But yeah, I'll leave all of that in the description for you guys to go check out. But Jace, thank you so much for chatting with me about your organization, your interests, all that kind of stuff. And thanks so much for taking your time to tell all the people about all the awesome stuff you're doing.
Yeah, thank you, Brandon. Thank you for providing this platform too for entomologists and entomophiles and everything. It's really great to have, a podcast like yours and all the work you're doing too in education. I appreciate that. There's not enough of us out there spreading the word at how cool
Mm-hmm.
these things are. So
Oh,
thank
for
you.
sure. Yeah, thanks for the kind words, and thanks for your time again. Yeah, it was really awesome.
Appreciate it.